The piercing sound of the alarm echoed through the Cape Cod Coast Guard station at 3:47 a.m. Lieutenant Jake Morrison leapt from his bunk, his 15 years of service kicking his reflexes into gear before his mind fully processed the situation. Through the barracks window, he could see massive waves crashing against the pier, driven by the 65 mph winds of Hurricane Helena. "Distress call, 45 nautical miles offshore," shouted Sergeant Rodriguez, bursting into the dormitory. 40-foot sailboat, 4 people on board. Last contact was 20 minutes ago. Morrison quickly donned his uniform, adrenaline already coursing through his veins. At 38, he had been part of hundreds of rescues, but something about this night felt different. Maybe it was the storm's intensity, or perhaps the lingering memory of the last rescue gone wrong when they lost an entire family the previous year. In the operations room, radioman Chris Valdez was desperately trying to re-establish contact. "This is Cape Cod Coast Guard calling sailboat Pacific Dream. Come in, over." Only static answered. "What was their last message?" Morrison asked, adjusting his life vest. "It was strange, sir," Valdez replied, frowning. "The guy was yelling something about not being able to trust each other anymore. Then the line cut out. Before that, they reported being without power and adrift for 3 days. Specialist Sarah Chen, the team's youngest at 26, looked at Morrison with concern. "Sir, with these conditions, wouldn't it be better to wait out the hurricane?" Morrison shook his head. "If they've been adrift for 3 days without power, they don't have that kind of time." He turned to Rodriguez. "Prep the chopper. We're taking off in 5. As the team prepared, Morrison couldn't shake the last radio transmission from his mind. In his years of experience, he'd heard it all. Panicked screams, desperate pleas for help, even confessions of impending death. But something about the man's voice, the desperation mixed with fear, not of drowning, but of something else. The HH-60 Jayhawk lifted off into the storm, its blades slicing through the violent air as it battled crosswinds. Morrison piloted the aircraft, while Chen monitored the radar, and Rodriguez checked the rescue gear. Through night vision goggles, the ocean looked like a black monster, its 20-foot waves rising like liquid mountains. "Visual contact," Chen shouted after 40 minutes of flight. 2 miles ahead, port side." The sailboat flickered in and out of sight among the massive waves, a ghostly white shape. Morrison made a risky maneuver, lowering the helicopter as close as possible. But something was wrong. There were no signs of life on deck, no emergency lights, no movement, no distress signals. "Are you sure it's the Pacific Dream?" Rodriguez asked. Chen double-checked the coordinates. "Positive. 40-foot Beneteau sailboat, same registration number. But, sir," she hesitated. "I don't see anyone on deck." Morrison tried the radio again. "Sailboat Pacific Dream, this is the Coast Guard. We're overhead. Respond." Dead silence. Due to the adverse conditions, a helicopter rescue was impossible. The team returned to base, and as the storm subsided at dawn, they set out in a 47-foot rescue boat. The waves were still high but navigable. When they reached the Pacific Dream at 8:30 a.m., as an eerie silence hung over the vessel, the sailboat's sails were torn, rocking violently but still afloat. "Pacific Dream, this is the United States Coast Guard," Morrison shouted through the megaphone. "Anyone on board?" No response. Rodriguez boarded first, followed by Morrison and Chen. What they found stopped them cold. The deck was covered in dark stains, undoubtedly blood. Navigation equipment was scattered and broken. A rope was abruptly severed, as if someone had been dragged. "Jesus Christ," Rodriguez muttered. "What happened here?" Morrison examined the stains closely. "This isn't from an accidental injury. Look at these scratches in the wood, and this mark." He pointed to what looked like a bloody handprint on the side of the cabin. Chen descended into the cabin and quickly shouted, "Guys, you need to see this!" The cabin's interior was in complete disarray, overturned furniture, shattered glass, and more blood, far more blood. But what caught Morrison's attention was the open logbook on the table, its pages stained red. He began reading the final entries. September 15th, Day 1. Left Boston as planned. Dave, Susan, Tommy and I. Weather was perfect. Everyone excited for our crossing to Bermuda. Susan made her famous tuna sandwich. September 18th, day 4. Unexpected storm last night. Lost the mainmast and the engine won't start. Sent a distress signal but no response yet. Dave's on edge, but I told him someone will find us. September 20th, day 6. Still adrift. Food's running out faster than expected. Tommy ate the last cereal bars in secret last night. Dave was furious. Ugly argument this morning. September 22nd, day 8. Dave and Tommy got into a physical fight today. Susan tried to break it up and got punched in the eye. We're all hungry and thirsty. Water's almost gone. Dave said Tommy's been eating in secret again. September 24th, day 10. Can't write properly anymore. My hands are shaking. Tommy disappeared last night. Dave says he fell overboard, but I saw blood on the cabin handle. Susan won't talk to me anymore. She just keeps staring at Dave with those eyes. September 25th, day 11. Found some pieces in the ice compartment. I can't, God forgive me, but I'm so hungry. Dave said it's the only way to survive. Susan agreed. I don't want to, but the final entry was nearly illegible. The ink mixed with what looked like blood. Dave's gone mad. He killed Susan this morning. Said she was eating more than her share. I'm locked in the cabin. I can hear him outside, talking to himself, dragging something. I have to get out of here. If anyone finds this, tell my family I love them. Don't let Dave... The entry stopped abruptly. Morrison's stomach churned. In 15 years of service, he'd seen many tragedies, but nothing like this. Chen was pale, leaning against the cabin wall. We need to search for survivors, Morrison said, trying to keep his voice steady. Rodriguez was already checking compartments. Here! Someone's here! They rushed to the sleeping compartment at the bow. Locked in the small space, curled in a fetal position, was a man about 45 years old, with a matted beard, blood-stained clothes, and glassy eyes. Sir, we're the Coast Guard, Morrison said gently. We're here to rescue you. The man slowly raised his eyes, and Morrison saw a deep madness in them. You came, he murmured. I knew you'd come. What's your name? Chen asked, approaching cautiously. Robert Carlson. I'm the captain. His voice was hoarse, almost a whisper. But I didn't do anything. It was Dave. Dave started it all. Where are the others, Robert? Morrison asked. Robert's eyes widened in terror. Dave is... He pointed shakily toward the cargo hold. He's still there. He wouldn't let me leave. Kept saying it was my turn to... Rodriguez checked the indicated compartment and returned, his face ashen. Morrison, you need to see this. In the cargo hold, Morrison found what remained of Dave Thompson. The body was in advanced decomposition, but marks on the neck suggested strangulation. Nearby, pieces of... Morrison closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He'd served in Afghanistan before joining the Coast Guard, but this was different. This was human savagery in its rawest form. He tried to kill me last night, Robert said when they returned to him. Said I was next, but I managed. He didn't finish, but it was clear what had happened. Chen found more evidence scattered around the vessel. Kitchen utensils with suspicious residue, cleaned human bones, and in the broken freezer, parts Morrison chose not to identify. How many days were you adrift? Morrison asked, already knowing the answer. 12, 13 days. We lost track. Robert began to sob. Food ran out on day 5. Dave said Tommy fell overboard, but I saw him push Tommy. Said it was for our survival. Then Susan, God, poor Susan. And you took part? Rodriguez asked bluntly. Robert looked at him with tormented eyes. Not at first. But when you're starving, when your mind stops working right, He covered his face with his hands. God forgive me, but I ate. We ate. Rescuing Robert was technically straightforward. They brought him onto the Coast Guard boat and returned to base. Medically, he was dehydrated and malnourished, but would survive. Psychologically, however, Morrison doubted he'd ever fully recover. During the return trip, Robert remained mostly silent, but occasionally muttered things like, "It had to be done," and Dave said it was the only way. Chen couldn't eat for days after the rescue. Rodriguez, a 20-year veteran, admitted he'd never seen anything like it, and Morrison spent weeks waking up in the middle of the night, haunted by the vacant look in Robert Carlson's eyes. The case was thoroughly investigated. Robert's account was corroborated by forensic evidence, and he was hospitalized for psychiatric treatment. The story never reached the media. The Coast Guard kept it under wraps, classifying it as a maritime tragedy with multiple fatalities. But for Morrison and his team, that rescue changed something fundamental in how they viewed the sea and the people who venture into it. The ocean was always dangerous. They knew that. Storms, shipwrecks, drownings, these were familiar tragedies. What they found on the Pacific Dream was different. It was proof that sometimes the greatest danger doesn't come from waves or winds, but from humanity itself when pushed to its limits. Months later, while training new recruits, Morrison always ended his lessons with the same reflection. The sea can be merciless, but never underestimate what humans are capable of when they believe their survival is at stake. Sometimes, what you'll rescue aren't just victims of storms. They're victims of human nature itself. Robert Carlson spent 3 years in psychiatric treatment. When released, he moved to a small inland town far from the ocean. He never sailed again, and according to his psychiatrist, he was never quite the same man who had left Boston on that sunny September morning. The Pacific Dream was towed to port and later destroyed. No one wanted to buy it, even at a reduced price. Some sailors are superstitious, and the story, though officially kept secret, spread through the region's nautical circles. Morrison served in the Coast Guard for 5 more years before retiring. Now, at 45, he works as a maritime safety instructor, but never shares the full story of the Pacific Dream rescue. Some things, he learned, are too heavy to share. But on stormy nights, when the wind howls along the Cape Cod coast, Morrison still recalls the look in Robert Carlson's eyes, a look he once described to his wife as the death of human innocence. And sometimes, just sometimes, he wonders how many other sailboats are adrift in the world's oceans, carrying secrets civilization would rather not know.